Most people think an industrial empire is built with massive capital and corporate genius, when, in reality, the greatest global titan in heavy machinery was forged by a simple piece of wood, sinking helplessly into the sticky, wet mud of a California farm. Imagine watching a machine worth a small fortune slowly swallow itself alive. That was the nightmare facing agricultural mechanics at the turn of the 20th century. Massive steam tractors were supposed to revolutionize farming. Instead, they dug their own graves. Every time engineers tried to build a heavier engine to pull more weight, the soft delta soil betrayed them. The ground swallowed the iron wheels, trapping multi-ton machines axle-deep in peat. The financial loss was staggering. Factory owners watched their life savings sink into the earth, unable to move forward, unable to turn back, and completely out of answers. Enter Benjamin Holt. He wasn't a born billionaire or an Ivy League graduate. He was a practical, hands-on machinist rooted in everyday manufacturing reality. When he looked at a sinking tractor, he didn't see an impossible dead end. He saw a flawed premise waiting to be shattered. Holt asked a question that changed industrial history. Why fight the mud by adding more weight when you can change how the weight meets the ground? That single question triggered a chain reaction. A desperate mechanical fix evolved into an accidental brand name, which sparked a brutal corporate war, which forced a survival-driven merger, which ultimately birthed a global industrial empire. Let us trace how one muddy field in California transformed an ordinary workshop into the unstoppable force known as Caterpillar. To understand the scale of the crisis, you have to step inside the Holt manufacturing floor. It was loud, hot, and relentlessly demanding. Workers hammered glowing metal while the smell of hot oil and coal smoke filled the air. Benjamin Holt was rarely found behind a desk. He preferred the grit of the shop floor, hands stained with grease, testing gears and studying torque. His company built massive steam traction engines. These iron beasts were marvels of 19th century engineering, designed to haul heavy agricultural loads across vast plains. But California's Delta region presented a terrifying challenge. The soil was essentially a bottomless sponge. When Holt sent his 40-horsepower steam tractor out to test in the rich, soft peat lands, disaster struck immediately. The massive steel wheels spun furiously, biting into the earth, but the tractor went nowhere. It just sank deeper, anchoring itself like an anchor dropped in quicksand. The economic stakes were crushing. Building these steam engines tied up enormous capital. If Holt could not solve the traction problem, his customers would go bankrupt, and his own manufacturing business would collapse right along with them. The industry tried every desperate trick imaginable. Engineers bolted wooden extensions onto the wheels, creating monstrous iron drums nearly 40 feet wide. They looked ridiculous, like giant paddle steamers rolling across dry land. None of it worked. The wider the wheels, the heavier the machine, and the deeper the sinkhole it carved for itself. Holt realized the entire premise of wheel-based traction was fundamentally broken. So, in a radical gamble, he ordered his team to strip the heavy rear wheels entirely off a steam tractor. What happened next seemed insane. Instead of wheels, Holt bolted a continuous set of wooden tracks wrapped around endless chains on both sides of the heavy machine. On a biting cold Thanksgiving morning in 1904, machine number 77 rolled out of the workshop toward the soggy testing grounds. Workers held their breath. Competitors watched with quiet skepticism. The heavy iron frame did not sink. Instead, the wooden tracks laid down their own flat roadbed, rolled over it effortlessly, and picked it back up from behind. The machine glided across soil that had trapped every tractor in the county. An awestruck photographer watching the slow, rhythmic movement of the interlocking tracks muttered that it moved just like a giant crawling caterpillar. The nickname stuck instantly. Yet having a brilliant engineering prototype was only the first hurdle. The business model still needed to survive the harsh realities of the early industrial market. Adopting a track-type tractor required customers to completely rethink how they operated. Traditional farmers were deeply suspicious of these strange, loud, slow-moving metal insects. Sales were agonizingly slow, and manufacturing costs were terrifyingly high. Holt had to prove the machine's value not through sales pitches, but through sheer brute utility. He deployed tractors into brutal environments, clearing forests, grading mountain roads, and hauling freight across terrain where horses and steam wheels died. As word spread, demand surged. But success attracted powerful rivals. A fierce competitor named C.L. Best was engineering his own line of crawler tractors, stepping directly onto Holt's territory. What followed was a bitter, multi-million-dollar corporate war. For years, Holt and Best locked horns in aggressive patent lawsuits, trademark skirmishes, and public marketing battles. Both companies poured fortunes into outdoing one another, draining their cash reserves and exhausting their leadership teams. Just as the legal battles reached a fever pitch, the world changed overnight. The First World War broke out, shifting global manufacturing demands into hyperdrive. Holt received massive government contracts to supply track-type tractors for military logistics, hauling artillery and supplies across the churned-up battlefields of Europe. The factories ran 24 hours a day. Profits soared, and the company expanded rapidly to meet wartime quotas. Then came the sudden, brutal shock. The war ended abruptly. Government contracts vanished overnight. The military canceled massive orders, leaving Holt's warehouses overflowing with unsold machinery built for a wartime economy that no longer existed. Debt crushed down like a physical weight. The company was drowning in financial obligations, and the bitter rivalry with C.L. Best suddenly felt like a luxury neither side could afford. Survival demanded an unthinkable compromise. Two fierce enemies had to become partners. In 1925, the leadership of the Holt Manufacturing Co. and C.L. Best Tractor Co. sat across a negotiating table and agreed to merge. They combined their engineering assets, unified their patent portfolios, and streamlined their manufacturing plants into a single powerhouse. The Caterpillar Tractor Co. Yet, unity alone could not guarantee dominance. An invisible technical bottleneck threatened their future growth. Traditional gasoline engines were heavy, expensive to fuel, and struggled to deliver the relentless torque required for massive, continuous earth-moving projects. Competitors thought gasoline was the only viable fuel. Caterpillar leadership made another high-stakes gamble. They invested heavily in building an entirely new, unproven technology from scratch, the heavy-duty diesel engine. Critics called it impossible. Industry experts claimed a diesel engine could never be made light or reliable enough for a mobile tractor. Behind closed doors, Caterpillar engineers worked tirelessly through the night, redesigning fuel injection systems and metallurgy. When the hand-built prototype, affectionately nicknamed Old Betsy, finally roared to life on the test stand, it hummed with a steady, powerful rhythm that signaled a new industrial era. It delivered massive power while slashing fuel consumption dramatically. Customers suddenly realized that owning a Caterpillar diesel tractor wasn't an expense. It was an investment that paid for itself through sheer operational efficiency. When the Great Depression struck the global economy just a few years later, wiping out thousands of industrial businesses, most manufacturers collapsed into bankruptcy. Caterpillar survived. Why? Because their diesel tractors saved customers money when every single penny mattered. Contractors refused to buy anything else. Those distinctive yellow machines became the mechanical muscle of modern civilization. They carved out the foundations of the Hoover Dam, bridged the Golden Gate, cut through jungles to build the Alaskan Highway, and reshaped the geography of the planet. An ordinary mechanic who refused to accept the limitations of sinking wheels did more than build a successful enterprise. He engineered the tracks upon which the modern world moves forward.